everyone, Jill here. Welcome to my show. I've got a delicious recipe for you today. There's a little chopping, there's a little rolling, there's a little tossing into the pot, and maybe a little stirring. I'm going to be making Instant Pot unstuffed sweet and sour cabbage rolls. And guess what? I'm making them low carb. It's going to be fantastic. So this means that I'm going to substitute the brown sugar for a sugar substitute, and then instead of rice, I'll be using riced cauliflower. How does that sound? Pretty good. It's kind of based on my Jewish sweet and sour stuffed cabbage rolls, which is on my blog, thisoldgal.com, which I know is really loved by a lot of people. So it's going to be great, and just like that recipe, you can either use ground turkey or ground beef, whichever you prefer. So if you already love that Jewish sweet and sour cabbage recipe, you're going to love this low-carb, unstuffed cabbage roll recipe, and you're in for a treat. Now we're going to whisk up the sweet and sour sauce. I've got 2 cups of tomato juice in this quart-size measuring cup. To that, I'm going to add 1 can of crushed tomatoes, and 4 ounces of tomato sauce. Give it all a good whisk. Next, you're going to add in a tablespoon of coconut oil or Crisco shortening, whichever you prefer. Now I'll add in 1 tablespoon of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon of ground pepper, and 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. Mix in 1/3 cup of a brown sugar substitute. Now add 1.5 teaspoons of sour salt. What's that you say? Sour salt? What is it? It's actually not a salt. It is a citric acid, and it gives a nice pop of a sour flavor. It's used in the authentic Jewish sweet and sour sauce. It's a real depth of flavor, so I like this a lot. I'm going to link below where you can get yourself a jar. Now you might be surprised at this next and final ingredient to the sauce. 1 tablespoon of fish sauce. Yep, just 1 tablespoon. That's going to give it a huge boost of flavor. So add a tablespoon and mix it in. Give the sauce a nice whisk and set it aside for now. The clump of coconut oil or shortening won't mix in, and that's fine. Worth noting, use the best brand of tomatoes that you can afford. These tomatoes were picked and processed very quickly, and that means that you're going to get the best and freshest flavor possible. So just use what you can afford. Fine ripened is great. Now let's mix up the meat mixture. As I said, I'm using some ground turkey today because I switch off between ground turkey and ground beef. I've got 2 pounds of ground turkey. You're going to add 1 egg. Mix that up a little bit. Drop in the egg. Now add 1 teaspoon kosher salt, 1/4 teaspoon ground pepper, 1 teaspoon minced garlic, and 1/4 teaspoon of xanthan gum. Now pour in 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Dump in about 1.5 cups of riced cauliflower. Mix the meat mixture up really well with your hands and make sure it's nicely mixed. As ground turkey is less flavorful than ground beef, a bit of Worcestershire sauce will beef up the flavor a bit. And since ground turkey is very, very wet, I added in xanthan gum, which will help bind the meatballs together, and so when you cook it, they're not going to fall apart. You'll get nice balls. The riced cauliflower is going to give your meatballs a nice and tender texture. You don't want them hard like a hamburger. I've already cut up the onions and the cabbage. I'll add 1 cut onion to the pot and spread it out along the bottom evenly as sort of a buffer layer. The onions are going to keep the meatballs off the bottom and then it'll prevent getting a burn notice. Grab your turkey and grab a cookie scoop and let's make some meatballs. Scoop up some meat and roll them into a ball. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you find large pieces of cauliflower in the mix, just pull them out. So these meatballs are about golf size. Now place the meatballs into the pot on top of the onions. You're only going to use half the meat mixture for this layer. Try to make about 10 or 11 meatballs for each layer. So I had a lot of cabbage and onions and I just put them in 2 bowls and I mixed them together. Now add half the cabbage and onions into the pot on top of the meatballs and kind of give them a little push down to make some room, but be careful not to smash the meatballs. Next, we're going to pour half the sweet and sour sauce over the cabbage. Now we're going to roll the rest of the meatballs and we're going to put in the pot and then we'll finish off the layers. Use about half the remaining cabbage and onions and spread that over the meatballs. Now pour the rest of the sauce carefully into the pot over the cabbage. Now add the rest of the cabbage and onions to the pot, which is going to really fill up the whole pot. Looks good, no? I know the pot looks full, but don't worry. The cabbage and onions are going to shrink down quickly to right below the fill level, so there's not going to be a problem. So here's my reasoning for layering the vegetables. As the bottom of the pot heats up quicker than the rest, right? We've got onions at the bottom. Those are going to start to liquefy and cause some liquid. And the meatballs are on top of it in the meantime, not on the bottom of the pot, scorching. It's like a buffer, as I said above. The onions in the second and the top layer, as well as the cabbage, since it's different parts of the pot, we're going to get a different texture. So the middle part of the pot will be very soft, and then the top part will be a little bit less soft, so you've got nice texture. So that's really great. And that's it. Then just place the lid and lock it into place. Make sure you close the pressure valve. And you're going to set the pressure cook time for 4 minutes. Okay, so after the 4-minute pressure cook time, what I did was I heard a beep, I waited 10-15 minutes, and then I released the rest of the pressure. So now it's time to open it up and take a look. It smells and looks wonderful. You can see how much the onions and cabbage shrunk, and it is under the fill line. So give it just a bit of a mix. See how nicely the meatballs stayed together? All right, let's serve it up and give it a try. I'm really hungry for this recipe. It's one of my favorites. I grew up with sweet and sour cabbage, and this is low carb. Did you say hi to them, Ed? All right, Ed says hi. All right, so it's an easy low carb recipe. It freezes nicely. You notice I made a huge batch. You can start taking some if you want. I've got a towel under because it's hot. So I made a big batch so that we can freeze it if we wanted to. Now, if you're just one person living alone or whatever, you can cut the recipe in half. Cook time, everything is exactly the same. All right, so let me have a taste. So the meatballs, are they nice and tender? Let me get a piece of cabbage and a meatball. Oh, I got a huge, do you see the size of the bite I got?
It's good. It's really good.
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, hold this a second.
Okay.
How can you hold that? It's so hot. Oh my God.
Asbestos hands.
Okay, so what things did you learn from this recipe? Ed.
Use vine-ripened tomatoes.
And why
They
is that?
taste better. They're fresher. And
Okay. Next, what's the next thing?
sour salt really gives that oomph that taste that you like.
That authentic old world flavor. You hear my cat crying? Well, it is dinner time. We try to time these around dinner and he's hungry. All right, and the third thing, Ed, 3, go. Has to do with the meatballs.
It's not polite to eat with your mouth full.
Okay.
Cauliflower. Cauliflower helps keep the meatballs nice and moist, and you're using cauliflower in lieu of rice, so it's keto. It's low carb.
Right, and they're nice and tender. See how easily he's cutting the meatballs? So I can't wait for you to try this recipe. Now I'm going to write lots and lots of tips in the written post on my blog, thisoldgal.com. So make sure you go there, because if you have any questions, hopefully I've answered them in the post. You can follow me on Pinterest and Instagram, and hit that bell so you can follow me on YouTube, and you'll be notified of my next video. So this recipe, I think I said it earlier, it's based on my Jewish sweet and sour cabbage recipe. You can even keto-fy that if you wanted. If you wanted to roll them up, just change out the rice for the cauliflower, and then use the low-carb brown sugar substitute. I'll link to the one that I like to use, but use whatever is your favorite. And sour salt. Sour salt is really key. It's what they've used forever. Well, everyone, I hope you've enjoyed our video, and I look forward to cooking for you again. Bye. See you next time.
And almost as much as I enjoy eating this.